Hey you guys, today I'm going to show you how to make a glueless lace closure wig using an 18-inch closure and 3 bundles of 20 inches from blackdiamondhaircollection.com. Today I'm using a deluxe weaving cap, and I like to use this wig cap for longevity and stability. And as I'm placing it on the wig head, you want to insert 4 push pins, 2 in the front and 2 in the back. And you're also going to do the same for the closure, putting 2 in the front and 2 in the back on each corner to allow the closure to lay flat on the mannequin head. After placing your T-pins on the closure to hold it in place, next step would be to put 2 stitches through the cap to create an anchor, and then begin to stitch 2 stitches through the closure to attach the closure to the wig securely. As you can see, I like to stitch underhand. It's something I've been doing for years. Some people do like to stitch overhand, but whatever you do, just make sure you're comfortable with it, and it's to create the best results at the end of the day. As I'm stitching, I like to sew my stitches through the closure pretty close together so the closure is flat and secure on the mannequin head. Make sure while sewing through the closure, your stitches are in the same consistent motion on each side. You can also see as I'm stitching that I'm pulling the closure towards me, and that is so the closure is flat as I'm sewing, and the end result would be flat as well. If it's necessary and you have a smaller wig head like I do, you definitely are going to have to pull it a little bit to make sure it's stretched out, so you don't have any lumps and bumps at the end of the results. Another disclaimer, when I first started making wigs on this mannequin head, I wasn't knowledgeable that the wig heads actually came in different sizes. To my understanding, they're like 20, 22, 24-inch wig heads. I'm pretty sure mine's on the smaller side of like a 20-inch wig head, but you can buy a larger one in the future and not have to worry about pulling so much on your closure while you're sewing your closure to your wig head. But that's just a heads up on why I have a little baggage in the back of the wig head, as you can see, but you'll see later on that I stretched out. Now when I begin sewing bundles, whether it's on a person's head or a mannequin head, I like to put a stitch in the beginning of the track, and that's just so I can have some security and stability while I'm stitching into that person's head or the wig head as well. And as you can see, every time I begin stitching, I always stitch through the track initially, probably the first 2 stitches, and then I continue on stitching around the track as I continue. And as you see, as soon as I get closer to the end of this bottom half of the wig, you'll see that I'll go directly through the track again. I am not also a person that likes to cut their bundles. I like to flip my bundles over and reuse them in the future. So you'll see that I flip over my tracks, and I will stitch around the bundles, and I will lock it in by wrapping the thread around my needle twice to make sure it's stable and secure. And then I'll continue on sewing around the bundles as I continue to sew. While sewing, some people do make the mistake of sewing through one too many holes. While I'm sewing, I like to sew through maybe 2 or 3 holes, and that keeps the wig stretchable and flexible and able to pull and not be extremely too tight and end up resulting to being smaller than you initially wanted it to be. Now with this type of wig cap, as you can see, there are adjustable straps that come on it. I do not, under any circumstance, sew on the adjustable straps because you never know when you might need them in the future. So I like to sew extremely close to them, but I don't sew on top of them. But that's just so you can get close enough to the edge and are able to flip over and just keep going and sewing in your regular motion. Also, as I sew, you'll notice the spacing between my stitches. I like to make sure my stitches are at least my pinky width from each other. It's not necessary to have them like maybe like a centimeter or like a millimeter away from each other. I feel like that stitching is extremely too small, and it's not necessary because you're still getting a very secure stitch based on me wrapping the thread around the actual track. This part right here is the most important as well, and this helps the wig lay seamlessly and look super natural, especially when the wind blows and your hair flies back. You won't see any tracks. What you want to do is to keep sewing all the way up until the very edge of this wig cap, and then you flip over. And when you flip over, make sure it's flat and you're able to actually pull and the stitching won't come up, and you're able to lay the track down flat and sew around it. Now as I'm going to the other side, you can see I'm starting to lead the track in an upward direction, and that's just so when like the wind does blow and your hair is blowing backwards, it naturally falls over the track that's like below it. So you want to make sure your hair is in an angle when you're sewing, so when it does, like I said, blow back, it's seamless, you don't see any tracks, and it's just one of those many methods that come in handy in the future. Another important factor when you're sewing in bundles is the spacing between each track. Depending on how large the bundles are, that'll determine how much space you need to put in between each track. Now, my hair bundles, they do come with quite a lot of hair in the bundles. So usually when I'm sewing and doing wigs, I like to do lay my pinky traditionally across the bottom track, and that'll be the distance between each track that's being laid. So once I'm getting to the top, it's evenly distributed and I don't end up running out of hair and needing more at the end. Right now you can see that I have curved the track to the top, and I am connecting it to the closure because I'm about to cut this off and secure it, because now I'm at the end of that side of the wig. And what I like to do is my last track always cut, and I like to stitch around it a few more times, probably like 2 or 3 times, just to make sure that's secured and connected to the closure. So when the closure is laid and flat ironed, it's super secure. And now I'm using that last track that I cut off to sew from the other side and finish off the wig. Now when I am using the last track and I'm closing off the wig, I do like to connect that last track to the closure. Like I said, that's just so when the hair from from the closure is flat ironed over the tracks. It's seamless. The product I like to use when flat ironing weave is the 7-in-1 Creme in Nature heat protectant, and I also like to use Nairobi foaming lotion on the closure. That helps lay the closure in place and get rid of any flyaways. After setting the wig underneath the dryer, you're going to brush out the hair, and you're going to use Paul Mitchell's Skinny Serum on the hair, and it pretty much leaves the hair non-greasy but super flowy at the same time. And you're going to do piece by piece when flat ironing the closure, and you're also going to use an electric hot comb to knock out any volume in the closure, and that'll leave the closure as flat as possible. After laying the closure down with a hot comb, you want to get an elastic band and 2 wig combs and place them in the back. You'll see in a moment. I like to use those for the glueless lace closure wig because it helps keep the closure comfortable, secure, and tight on a person's head. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully you learned something today. Make sure you leave a comment and subscribe and tell me how I did, and give me any further advice for the future. See you next time.